Hi everyone, we've just had yet another episode of Gundam Gquuuuuux come out. And to sum up this episode, well, it's basically been split into two parts. The first part is basically how Char created the Zen Nova effect, the Battle of Solomon, and basically threw it off course. And the other one is basically dealing with Yan as she arrives in Granada for stuff. So anyway, the first part of the episode. Well, this is where things get very interesting. The episode starts off with M'Quuuuuux launching his attack on Solomon, and apparently on Luna 2, I should say, and Luna 2's been holding out for the better part of 3 days by this point, and eventually he sends in the Big Zams to breach the assault line, as that was the Big Zam was designed to do. He's designed to assault heavy positions. But then the Federation plays their trump card. They plan to move Solomon onto a collision course with Granada. And of course, this is also the first cameo we get of another Gundam Legacy character, namely Commandant Wakane. Now, Lady Cassilia plans to stay and pretty much let the giant spacewalk fall on her. But Char Aznable has a plan. The only squadron they have, of course, is Char's raiding force, comprising of the Soden, or their version of the White Base, and 3 Musais. Their plan is basically to assault the fortress, get into the base via the use of the unique abilities of the Soden, which apparently was an assault landing ship, and apparently we know how the thing actually does it. It smashes its way through a door, and then using a series of Zaku torsos with a reactor set to explode on the escape. He and Chalia Bull end up fighting their way through the Federation fleet, and throughout the way they destroy numerous mobile suits, and several warships as well. And then across the battle, Char's bits start running out of fuel, so at least we know what happened to at least 4 of them. To the 2 he had, above the 2 he had on his back. They ran out of propellant, so he crashed them into a warship to make good use of them. While Chalia Bull ends up fighting his way also through as well. Anyway, as the battle progresses, the Soden then smashes its way through, but along the way, 2 of its escorting Musais are destroyed. But they manage to make landing, and the Rickdoms and Zakus manage to spill out into the fortress and make their way to the assigned points that Char would reckon the fact would, by calculations, would cause them in reactor to detonate, and then see a large chunk of Solomon detach, and see Solomon's trajectory shift by the centre of mass, shifting from the centre off in the other direction. This would then cause, especially after the acceleration burn, would cause Solomon to rapidly change course, and then not slam into Granada. Well, at least that was the plan. But Char, of course, has his own plan. He still plans to eliminate the Zabe family, except now he has a perfect opportunity to silver this. He gets done by basically saying, in fact, one of the bombs didn't explode. So once the charges are set, he then moves one of the bombs, bringing the fact that 3 explosions might just make sure for a fact that the Solomon will stay on course and probably slam into Granada. However, a blue gun cannon light appears, done up like the original colours of the original Gundam. Now, I thought it was armour in the cockpit. It turns out that it was Artesia. And in the ensuing battle, Char stays his hand, and then all of a sudden, Sailor, I think, fires the beam cannon, causes a massive cave-in as she escapes, and a whole load of rocks land on Char, and basically, he has to then dig himself out. But as he does so, his psychometry system starts basically becoming active and starts rapidly cycling. Meanwhile, the crew of the Soden, all the other Zakus await, and knowing for a fact they have to get clear of the blast radius, and with time up, Dren orders the Soden to retreat, and he commits an engine burn and breaks off at full speed, knowing the explosion that happens. But as the Soden starts cycling up, both the Federation and Zeon quickly begin gaining witness what effectively is the first Zen Nova effect, hallmarked by inverse Minovsky particles. This then what happens is, we're not sure what happens, but then Char and the Red Gundam teleport somewhere after seeing the Kira of the effect build up over time, and they teleport away, taking a large chunk of Solomon with them. And then Char goes off in yet another direction. And Solomon because it has a huge portion of its mass shift, doesn't hit Granada, and now just sort of orbits above it. I thought it actually would slam into the moon, but that's just me. And of course, we know the rest. The Federation surrenders and sues for peace, and the colony nations basically get their independence. In the next part is, I think, quite interesting, because we know for a fact that the Supreme Commander, that Gurdon and Cassidy, don't see eye to eye, and they rarely leave their respective areas, out of the need to, in effect, out of fear of assassination. Anyway, throughout the course of the story, throughout the course of this section, Yan basically is adapting to life in Zeon. Machi, of course, has been captured aboard the Soden, and is presumably in the Soden's brig, or maybe she might have moved into crew quarters. And then she's basically Cassilia has sponsored her to enter Cassilia's basically the Zeon Technical Institute, or a naval academy. And it turns out that she's been chosen to pilot the second Gquuuuuux unit, the D-Fran. Anyway, it turns out for a fact that this is an even more high-spec machine. However, two pilots have gone in, but both of them have died before they even got a chance to pilot it. It's only of a heart attack. And it's mentioned that in the episode that quite possibly someone might be poisoning them. But this is the 21st century, and these are young people. These are young guys, so yet they're dying of heart attacks, so something must have happened. Anyway, as the story goes on, Jan is actually starting to settle in. And of course, the guy who suggested the whole thing about the party and even mentioned the poisoning decides to bake her a cake. However, the cake turns out it was poisoned. And while he was sent to spy for Gurdon, in actual fact, he poisoned his two friends out of his love for them. If I say that one year war changed them as that they all are orphans, and he doesn't want to see them change into what he calls Diablos, but you think high-powered newtypes. Anyway, at the same time, Xavier finds out what his best friend has been doing and confronts him about it as he pulls a gun on Jan. In the ensuing chaos, Jan flips over the table and plans to make her escape. But then, as she climbs into the gun to get it active, but Xavier's friend climbs up after her and doesn't just want to turn into a Diablo for some strange reason. But of course, she turns out she is, and as she plans to get into the Gundam's cockpit, the machine powers up and two bits deploy from, I think it's either its backpack or its head. These bits then fly around and shoot the friend with a couple of beam guns, and there's a massive explosion, molten metal, and apparently there's a breach somewhere, I think, in the hull, and bulkhead doors, and there's a need to evacuate. It turns out basically for a fact that particular Gquuuuuux unit has been unable to move ever since it was active, ever since it was created. But now Jan was able to at least get it to do something. Well, not that she can pilot the thing, isn't yet to be said. But we know for a fact that Xavier, while he could certainly power up and operate the Gquuuuuuux, he couldn't get it to fully active. Anyway, throughout the course of the episode, Cassilia is then with her aide, who's making her tea, and then she draws her gun on him. It turns out for a fact that he was the one who supplied the poison to Xavier's friend. And when Cassilia confronts him about it, he says for a fact that basically he won't let people become so-called Diablos, which I think is a variation of newtypes you can cause quite a fair bit of, but apparently they lose their humanity. Also at the same time, it turns out for a fact that Gurren is also experimenting with cyber newtypes, and he doesn't want the project, in regards to which led to the creation of the Gquuuuuux, complete for some strange reason. Then, at the same time, a couple of scientists arrive at the port, but also at the same time, Machu escapes from the Soden, presumably when it was flying on trajectory to Earth, and the last thing we see is the Gquuuuuux enter the atmosphere. So quite possibly she's going to make it to Earth and finish what she planned to do with Shunju. Yeah, this episode was definitely full of a lot of twists. It was nice to see exactly what happened with the Soden at the time, or rather what happened at Solomon and why Char went and sent Nova and why his psychometry system went out of control, and whether or not we're not exactly sure what this Kirkus Rose is. It's either a machine, but judging by the fact they call it the Lala song, maybe they're blending Lala in with Marion Welsh and the exam system. Maybe, but that's just a piece of obscure Gundam lore. Or perhaps there's more afoot. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But Gundam Gquuuuuux is once again has been proven itself to be very, very interesting. Machu is now moving forward, and it seems like for a fact that the confrontation between Cassilia and Gurren is moving closer. I'm not even sure what Gurren is up to. He might have gone completely batshit crazy. Or he might be saying for a fact, I was caring for the dying Degwin. We may not know. Well, we'll have to find out next week when the next episode comes out. Well, I've been the US Challenger. I was playing you that, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheerio!